In today's deep dive, the snow and ice storms that are gripping the South and the Northeast are just the latest in a series of what we're calling billion-dollar weather events over the past year. Basically costs $1 billion to dig out of. Today, President Obama is visiting California's central San Joaquin Valley. He'll be landing in a drought disaster zone amid a political battle over how to control the water in one of the biggest states in the U.S., the biggest state. But the severe and already crippling drought is just one of nearly a dozen major weather disasters over the last 12 months. 2013 was a near record year for disastrous storms in the U.S. It started in March when 10 confirmed tornadoes swept through Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee. In May alone, 151 tornadoes swept across the plains, devastating, of course, Moore, Oklahoma, and killing 37 people. In September, the flash flooding took out roads and isolated entire towns across northern Colorado. 9 people were killed, and Colorado's still rebuilding from that. Again, at least another billion-dollar event. Those are just a few of the 7 separate major disasters, each costing at least $1 billion in 2013. And according to NOAA, while that's close to the nation's 10-year high, the planet Earth did set a record for billion-dollar weather disasters in 2013 with 41. Super Typhoon Haiyan and the June floods in Central Europe cost tens of billions each. Now we're barely into 2014, and an historic drought is sapping farms in the West. California had 0 rain days in January, even though that's usually California's wettest month. This satellite shot shows last January and this January. You can see the drought. Now the question is what to do about it. Governor Jerry Brown declared a drought state of emergency, and he's asking for federal help to manage the state's existing water.
Look, you got to have rain. Aside from the rain, you got to use the water efficiently. You got to have storage, and we have to balance all the interests because we have no other choice.
Governor Brown is also worried about this. There have been 406 wildfires so far this year. It's February, folks. Last January, there were none. Congress is already getting involved. Last week, the House passed a controversial water bill. Democrats say it steals water from people up north. Republicans say it will help deliver water to struggling farmers in the Central Valley.
California's drought is nature's fault, but our failure to prepare for it is our fault.
Whatever little whistles and bells and bows you want to put on it, this is essentially a theft of water from someone to give to somebody else.
This is essentially throwing a grenade into California water that would ignite a water war unlike anything we've ever seen.
Water, the oil of the 21st century, right? Anyway, President Obama has said he'd veto that bill if it ends up landing on his desk. But senators, or Dianne Feinstein and Barbara Boxer, they want to send California $300 million in drought aid. They'd give federal officials more flexibility to pump water throughout the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta. They'd also let water districts delay their payments. Now, Senator Feinstein says her bill won't waive the Endangered Species Act, but gives the state more flexibility in managing the water supply. And that's really the crux of the problem. Democrats have championed river restoration and environmental projects. Republicans say the farms in cities are the ones paying the price for that. And beyond the water, today the president is already anticipating the next big problem, and that's wildfires. California is just one of 11 states where critical farming areas have been declared primary disaster zones because of this drought. So let's get a little bit behind this issue. I'm joined now by Reed Wilson with the Washington Post and climatologist Brian Fuchs from the National Drought Mitigation Center at the University of Nebraska. Now, Reed, I'll start with you. You lay this issue of the wildfire preparation that California is trying to go through. And this is really among the president's motivation of going to do this. They think their summer is going to be dominated by this issue, and they politically want to show that they're on top of it.
Well, look, California has 23 aircraft that they use to fight fires. This is the time of year when those aircraft go in for servicing, when they're grounded for a few months. Maintenance happens. 8 of those aircraft have been flying continuously because there have been so many fires over the last month or so. In Humboldt County, one of the wettest counties in America, that sees an average of more than 100 inches of rain every year. There was a 333-acre wildfire last month. It is dry as a bone, and fire officials from the state, local level, all the way up to the federal level are worried that this is happening across the West and that we could be in for a serious landmark year in terms of wildfires.
So, Brian, explain what is the weather pattern in the Pacific that has caused this drought, that has caused basically California to go without a single rain day in January?
Well, what we were seeing was a high-pressure system that had established itself over the western part of the United States. And as that high pressure set in, what it was doing was deflecting all the storm systems way to the north into Canada. And essentially, those storms that were coming ashore or coming towards the west coast just didn't have the opportunity to reach the west coast. And they were being deflected into Canada, and then they were riding down into the central part of the United States.
Now, what is it about? Now, why is it, and why have we been getting all these storms in the east then? Explain that. Is this a case where this system has essentially pushed all weather systems either north or south of California?
Yeah, that is the case. With the way the high pressure is, the storm systems that are approaching California get deflected further to the north, and then as they do get a chance to move further south, they end up in the central part of the U.S. and either get into the southeast or the mid-Atlantic or up into the northeast, depending on the storm track. And so that's why we've seen the active and cold weather over the eastern half of the United States, while the western half has been fairly quiet through much of this winter.
Now, do you have is there an explanation to this that you think is man-made? Is this an impact of climate change? Is this something that's cyclical? What is it? What have you found in your research?
When looking at this situation, we're not seeing any single driver that's establishing this weather pattern over the western U.S. Other than saying that it's just the roll of the dice of how weather patterns work, there really isn't a strong scientific explanation for it, other than it did happen. And once we see these high pressures start to establish themselves, it is very hard to break them down. And we've seen this in other parts of the country as well, when droughts have been established for quite some time.
Now, Reed, obviously state governments are trying to, one of the stories out east is about how state government winter budgets are blown through. Yep. They're blowing holes through them and they've running out of money. Jerry Brown's trying to come up with some money. We do have this issue of water. So this preparation, though, they're usually, politicians aren't very good at saying, hey, let's have a rainy day fund or a drought day fund.
No, they're not.
To prepare for this.
Especially because in this instance, you have to have interagency cooperation. You have to have the state level working with the local level, working with the federal level. And in a lot of cases, the wildfire situation actually is being made worse by mankind, not necessarily because of the climate, but because we're building in new places. The wildland-urban interface is the area essentially between urban areas and the wildlands where these fires happen, and human construction is going into those new areas now. I mean, only 16% of that area is developed. If you get up to 50% of the western wildland urban interface developed, then that basically is going to eat up the entire U.S. Forest Service's budget for just fighting fires to protect humans.
Well, this goes to the whole Moore, Oklahoma situation where 50 years ago, there wasn't that population density.
Yeah. And the economic recovery is fueling a new building boom. I talked to a couple of fire folks who were saying that, 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was rare to have a fire that involved human structures. Now it's rare to have a fire that doesn't involve human structures.
So, Brian, given obviously the work that you do, but is this something that government's going to have to take a look at and essentially stop some development for simply because of whether it's managing water resources, making sure people are, wildfires are a fact of life. They're going to happen in nature in some ways, but you maybe were overdeveloping and it costs us more, this at the end of the day, then it's going to cost taxpayers money. So if you want to save taxpayers money, you have to slow down development.
I think you're exactly right. When we look at the population shift to the western U.S. and even the southwestern U.S., we've developed a lot of areas that up until this point have been pristine. They've been more remote areas. And so as we continue to push people into those areas, not only are we stressing the resources for the region, but we're also putting people in a predicament because of how do we protect them from issues such as wildfires. And when you have a drought situation where you're talking both the lack of water and an increased fire danger associated with that, it does bring up some very tough questions to answer of how do we continue with this moving forward.
Brian, very quickly, any change in the weather pattern that's going to somehow make it so that maybe California gets wetter?
Well, we did see a good shift last week where parts of Northern California did pick up some great rains, some places over a foot of rain just with a 2 to 3 day event. It looks like over the short term here that, again, maybe Northern California will pick up some more of that precipitation in areas further to the north. As you go further south into the Central Valley and Southern California, they did not see those good rains last week. And again, the forecast is not looking too favorable to bring these large storms that really all the West needs to see between now and the end of the winter season.
All right, Brian Fuchs, climatologist, National Drought Mitigation Center. Reed Wilson, state government reporter for the Washington Post. Excellent work. Thank you, sir. Thank you both. We're right back. We got the Friday gaggle. All things 2016 because it's Friday, right? Watch the Daily Rundown only on MSNBC.